Hello, my name is David Higgins, and I'm recording this video in order to introduce to you a book that I just published. It's available on Amazon Books, and the name of the book is The Metaphysics of COVID-19, Idealism, Disease, and Society. Okay. So I wrote this book obviously in response to the pandemic which we are experiencing right now. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of a video introduction so that you might be encouraged to acquire the book. I'm not going to explain the whole book at this moment. I may record a series of videos kind of going through the book for those who aren't inclined to acquire it and read it. But this will just be an introduction to the book, and I think I'll start by reading the actual intro, which is just 4 short pages. So this is the introduction from this book. Okay. This is a metaphysical analysis of COVID-19. People are dying, and a profound disruption of the rhythms of global society is causing serious suffering. It is both an individual and a major societal problem. Making matters worse, the issue has been deliberately highly politicized as well. The disruption is universal across all borders and boundaries, affecting the poor and the rich. Like environmental issues, this disease hits the foundation of our life. It is very complex, involving fundamental questions about reality, the dynamics of human society, and human physiology. COVID-19 is a biological contagion killing individually. It is a lifestyle and economic contagion that is equally deadly. Not all diseases have this sort of social presence. It is more complex than an individualized disease like cancer. The book will discuss the individual physical manifestation along with the social connection because they are interwoven and inseparable. The pandemic is emblematic of the 21st century globalized cosmopolitan reality that we now live in, and forces us very consciously to take stock and decide how we will proceed amongst one another. Okay, so metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that tries to establish foundational concepts providing an explanation of the total character of reality itself and our experience of it. Basically, metaphysics is the attempt to analyze and describe rationally what reality is, including non-physical aspects. So establishing a proper metaphysical perspective on COVID will translate into a deeper understanding of life in general. Please note that establishing a metaphysical understanding does not negate the physical level. The metaphysical level is above the physical, and it includes it. Conscious awareness of the abstract does not negate the tangible. It makes it deeper and more complete. Knowing the metaphysical basis of disease does not reduce the importance of hygiene. The focus of this discussion will be the human reality of COVID-19, as it is present in human individuals and human society. There are 2 different elements that compose the reality called human. A human has a mind, and the mind is in a body. These 2 are separate, but intimately connected. Society also has a shared mental level and an external level. The individual consciousness is embedded in and interwoven in society's collective mindset. These inner levels are highly significant because they have a major impact on the externals, and therefore they must be incorporated into the analysis of the disease. Research on the nature of human consciousness and the role that it plays in the ongoing creation of reality has become a major scientific field. Experiments in quantum physics demonstrate that the observer's mind influences the actual behavior of subatomic particles. A proper metaphysical system includes an understanding of the basis of consciousness, the mental and psychological level, and the way that it affects the physical phenomena which we all encounter. The approach here will be to first argue for the idea that human reality is primarily mental and psychological, and secondarily physical. Therefore, the correct interpretation and response to the disease would be to incorporate psychological elements in the physical response. The psychological impact of COVID-19 in both the individual and in society is profound, and it is even more important to all except those who are ultimately to succumb physically. The threat of the disease is as powerful as the disease, because the response of society to the threat has in itself done real damage. COVID-19 in all its complexities provides the framework to explore general metaphysical ideas, which apply in all the experiences of life. It is a sounding board to which everyone is well acquainted. So everyone has some meaningful personal context and perspective. Though COVID-19 as a phenomenon is completely interwoven into the entire fabric of society, prescriptions on the political, economic, and public policy issues involved in this crisis are not the aim of this work. The aim is to attempt to influence the global thinking community to consider a more enlightened perspective through metaphysical analysis. To be expressed here are strongly held intellectual convictions, not beliefs. Believing has a negative connotation in association with the willingness to ascribe to a certain perspective without being able to entirely support the position logically with evidence. Rationality is an essential necessity, it should be. Why, I just discovered a typo in my book. Oops. Maintaining humility and a commitment to the process of personal intellectual growth is critical. So yeah, a major typo in my opening chapter. Oh well. Didn't really have an editor. I kind of just put this together pretty quickly, obviously, because we're still in the early days of this pandemic. I've been working on it for a couple of months, I guess, during the lockdown. Any case, that was the intro, and it wasn't really a script for reading exactly. So I hope that was intelligible, like you could understand what was going on while I was reading. So basically, I'm taking a metaphysical approach to COVID-19. So metaphysics tries to talk about what is reality itself. Where did all of this come from, and what does it mean, and how does it continue in existence? So there are fundamental questions that are typically very abstract and obtuse, and my perspective is really not my own. I have to give credit where credit is due. So there's I think four major philosophers that I have basically put together in my own perspective, and so the first one that I want to mention is this fellow George Berkeley. He put forth the metaphysical philosophy that is known as Idealism. Okay, and the two books that are contained in this book are called The Principles of Human Knowledge and Three Dialogues. And those two books are actually, not the easiest read in the world. Thankfully, of course this has been around for 250 years, and so there's been plenty of commentary on it. This book is an excellent book in order to find Berkeley's ideas more accessible. And this book is called Idealism, New Essays in Metaphysics, and it's edited by Tyrone Goldschmidt and Kenneth Pierce. This is an excellent book. It's basically a collection of essays about idealism, and here's a list of highly significant university scholars who contributed to the work. This book was published in 2017, so there is plenty of contemporary interest in the metaphysical philosophy of idealism, and this is an excellent book. So I'll read you the first paragraph of their introduction. Idealism is difficult to define precisely. In this, it is similar to other general and rival approaches to metaphysics, including materialism and dualism. Roughly speaking, we may say that idealists endorse the priority of the mind. Okay? So the mind is the basis of reality, is what idealism basically talks about. The book gets into it. Okay, it's a deep concept. It's abstract. So my approach to COVID-19 is to basically say that reality is primarily mental, and the disease has a mental basis, and it might seem counterintuitive, but it actually is sourced in the collective mind. Okay, and so this book that I've written is one that's going to challenge your notions on the basis of reality, and Berkeley he basically looks at our physical experience and rationally deduces that the only thing that truly exists is our mind, and that there is no self-existing physical matrix, essentially. Okay, so that's a big idea that I'll just throw out there, and but I think I do a pretty good job of breaking it down. And in any case, so idealism comes from George Berkeley. He's the guy who brought it to light back when, but there are plenty of philosophers who have spoken about it since then. And then another major influence on my approach is this fellow Peter Berger, and he wrote a book called The Social Construction of Reality. So now Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman are sociologists, and they basically say that reality is based in what society collectively agrees upon to be true. So that basically reality is a social mental construct. Okay, and this is a great book, and this is an easy read in the sense that, well, I mean, it's technical and abstract, but it's not too, sometimes you're reading philosophy and they use their style is really wordy and a lot of long sentences with a lot of commas that can be hard to make sense of, but this is actually a fairly easy read, and it's an intriguing book, and it really has highly influenced me. But actually the most major influence on my worldview is from a guy named Emanuel Swedenborg, and he was born in 1688 and died in 1772. So curiously enough, he was contemporary with George Berkeley, but they did not know one another. Swedenborg is a mystical philosopher. Okay, he is a scientific genius. You should get on Wikipedia. You could look up Swedenborg.com. There's a ton of biographical information available on Swedenborg, and I won't really go into it right now. But he presents a very intriguing metaphysical perspective that I talk about in my book. And so he claimed in his 56th year to have the inner levels of his consciousness essentially enlightened. And so his perspective comes from having an awareness of the essential or deeper psychological levels of the human mind, and particularly the collective human mind. So he's got like 35 volumes of theology and religion and metaphysics, and I've been reading him for 25 years, and I think he's great. A lot, some people think he's cracked, but there's, a lot of biographical information where you can investigate for yourself and decide. And but if you're going to read Swedenborg, you need to be aware of a fellow named Charles Augustus Tulk. Okay, he was, he was like one generation removed from Swedenborg. His dad, John Augustus Tulk, was actually personal friends with Swedenborg. John Augustus Tulk was a British aristocrat and a member of the British Parliament, and Swedenborg published his books in London and presumably became acquainted with John Augustus Tulk at that time. Swedenborg was a nobleman. He knew kings and queens around Europe. He published books in London and in Amsterdam because there was no freedom of the press in Sweden in his day, which is where Swedenborg was from. Anyway, he knew John Augustus Tulk, and so Charles Augustus Tulk was John Augustus Tulk's eldest son. So presumably, and in any case, Charles Augustus Tulk was a great Latin scholar. Swedenborg wrote in Latin, and Charles Augustus Tulk wrote a very important book called Spiritual Christianity, which is commentary on Swedenborg's books, and he points out, important issues in approaching Swedenborg that one needs to be aware of if we're going to be able to process Swedenborg properly. And so Spiritual Christianity by Charles Augustus Tulk is another great book which influenced my book. And then the final writer I want to mention is a fellow named Ulrich Beck, and he is the author of this book called World at Risk, but he wrote another book called Risk Society, which came out in 1986, and he analyzes society in the 21st century and characterizes it as being subject to the condition that we're under, this constant state of threat. There's so many things that impact our state, our psychological state collectively in the world, that are basically threats of disaster that are just constantly with us, such as the environmental situation, or international suicide terrorism, and obviously COVID-19 being a threat plays into what Ulrich Beck, when he analyzes our state in relation to this insecurity that we all feel, and how it affects our relationships with society and life in general. So these are all authors that I basically put together to come up with my take on the current state of the pandemic. This is a good book. I wrote another book previously that that about Swedenborg and his metaphysics, and I'm happy to say that this book is much better than that one. But you should look on Amazon Books, The Metaphysics of COVID-19, Idealism, Disease, and Society. And my name is David Higgins, and I will probably post another video diving a little bit deeper into my approach to COVID-19 on a subsequent video. This one's already nearly 20 minutes long, so I think I'll wrap it up. I don't want to test your ability to hang in and listen to a guy ramble for longer than 20 minutes. So in any case, I hope that was interesting, and I hope that you will pick up my book, and I'll see you in the next video.